There you go.
Okay, so Ken, your question was.
Oh, the question that Jean asked was about a story in the book that none of us can call to mind immediately. That has to do with an interaction between her and the Jito Popsonim. And her question was about how you go about confirming stories. Uh, and I think it would have been useful to have a little bit of back and forth with Jean so we had a little more context rather than the general question of how does one confirm stories. But I'm just wondering from your point of view as a compiler and an editor, uh, you're making choices about what to include and how to include it and what to say about it, if there's anything at all. And I'm just wondering how you approach the task of how you engage the material if it involves uh, not only Bobby but a story Bobby's telling.
So my method was, well, first of all, we had a couple different approaches to working together on a book before
Hmm.
this book came together. And which led to the method for this book, which was that I first what I did was I went about I'm a clinical psychologist and I have a bit of a researcher background, so I gathered all the Dharma talks I could find that Bobby had given going back to the 70s, the early 70s, her earliest
Ooh.
talks.
Hmm.
And that took about 2 years, actually, just to compile all of that. And, so and so would tell me to talk to so and so, who told me to talk to so and so, who sometimes I was a little shy to contact so and so. So I waited until I met someone who knew so and so. And then, so I gathered them in multiple different formats. Some of them were from were in audio format. Most of them were in audio format. Talks that she had given
Hmm.
that had been digitized, and I got oodles of those. And some of those I actually got mostly I got from this archive that a couple of people had been compiling, but some of them I got directly from Zen centers where she had given a talk. And sometimes she
Hmm.
said to me, "Oh, I gave this great talk at San Francisco Zen Center. I don't remember what year it was. Ask them." So some of them I got that way. And some of them even were audio taped and on cassette tapes. I got a fair number of those from Margaret Mackenzie in Chicago. She had a collection of cassette tapes. So I obtained those and I digitized those. And then all of the digital ones that I obtained, I had transcribed. So I didn't do the transcription myself. That was more than I could handle, but I could handle uploading them to another place that would transcribe them for me. So I did that. And I think I shared a lot of those transcriptions with you, Ken, for to use as for primary point at some point.
Oh, you sent some, yeah.
I did, and I actually a fair number. So when I compiled those, and then I also had my own experiences of Bobby giving talks that I went back and got recordings of, like from Kilche at Providence Zen Center, because that's where mostly I would hear her talks over the past few years. And then I spent a whole summer doing reading them all and doing just making notes of what I thought the theme was. The primary themes were like circling what I thought the primary themes were. And then I started to see certain themes emerging that seemed to be the things Bobby centered her talks around, the things she really were important to her from our school's teachings. And then there would be holes in some of those. So I went back to actually Primary Point archives to fill in some of those holes and got permission from you, Ken, to use excerpts from Primary Point to fill in some of those gaps. And then from that, the table of contents took shape. And that's also how each essay itself became organized, was looking at those themes and then how the story flowed around those themes. And then where there were gaps there, I interviewed Bobby myself to ask specific questions and then recorded her responses and got those transcribed, and they kind of filled in the gaps. And then every one of those things I sent to Bobby, the table of contents, each essay, the outlines, and got her feedback. She went over every single word in the book. I mean, they were all her words to start with. I feel like my creative skills involved synthesizing and organizing and then creatively putting her words together. But then I would hand her an essay that I drafted in kind of rough form. And then she would read it over and she would make it her own. A lot of the essays, well, pretty much all the essays, she just slashed multiple paragraphs that I included. I mean, I did try to include more information just to give her something to work with. But then, even then, I liked some of the things that I included. And there are a couple essays, they're just like half as long as what I handed her. But I deferred to her on all of those decisions. I mean, they're her words. She's the author. She's very clear, clearly the author of all the words. I just helped with the organizing of things. So I would say that was our process. And it was fun. We would talk them through, we had a lot of conversations, and I recorded those conversations to use also. And it was a really nice way to get to spend time with her too.
So my question is how did you get her to agree to do this with you? Because Ken tells me that she's not one that's going to eagerly volunteer herself up to go do these things.
It was a process, and it was a learning how to trust myself. There was faith involved, and it took me time to find my way. I first was at a Kilche, and I think Bobby was the teacher, and I just had this strong feeling come over me that often, a lot of energy was rising, and I had this feeling that just this insight that I needed to teach the residents about trauma and grief. That was my original thing. But I immediately did a lot of checking, making, and holding of all of that. And I thought, who am I? Nobody in this school even knows me. I was a clinical psychologist at that point, but I hadn't even taken 5 precepts yet, I don't think, and in our school. And so I kind of elaborated that into, well, maybe because Bobby's a hospice nurse, she and I could do some kind of a continuing education thing together. And then I thought, well, maybe we could write it, and then that could turn into a book. So that is how it started, like 20 years ago. But then that didn't take off really at all. Like we kind of made some attempts and that fell flat. It felt like it didn't really go anywhere. And then I was at Kilche many years later. And then what arose very strongly in me was I I want to help Bobby write a book. And she was the teacher. So I went to her after Kilche and I said, I still was shy. I said, Bobby, is there anything you need help with? And she said, well, there's this book project, and people tell me I should write a book, and some people have tried to help me write a book, and so maybe you could help me with that. But don't worry, if it doesn't work out, we'll still be friends. It'll all be okay. I won't hold it against you. It's all me. And and so I immediately thought, oh, I can help with this. I don't know what this is, but I got this. No problem. And it was just so clear to me, whatever that was, whatever her thing was there, that I could help with that. Whatever that was making it difficult for her. Because I was so clear that, I think the world could benefit from having her perspective on things.
That's awesome. Tom, did you have a question for Elizabeth?
I didn't, but I'll think of one. And so I'll think first of all, I'll thank Elizabeth, for taking the effort and doing what she did. I mean that's this will probably outlast this mortal life. So thank you for what you've done. I think it's interesting. I was looking at every teaching basically is. What is this? Don't know. That's what I find. As I'm at chapter 10 now, and basically, if I had to write the summary of the book, I think that's the summary. So, am I missing? Am I missing anything, or is it more than what is this? Don't know.
It was so hard to
Hmm.
write the later chapters because it did feel like Zen overall, it's so simple. There's like just the one thing to do. And then we say it 9 bazillion different ways. And then something clicks at a certain moment in a certain way. But really that's all there is, right? What is this? Only don't know. Like that's it. That's the core teaching of our school. And 100% believe in yourself. 100% believe in that. And to me, that last part, the 100% believe in yourself, that is another place that Bobby, that's one of her real prominent teaching styles. She doesn't seem to ever waver from her faith that it's there, just believe in yourself, you'll find it. What is this and don't know, and go straight, and so I know I agree with you. It is it. That is the message. And it was hard to write the final chapters because would say to her, Bobby, I did some cutting and pasting, right, to try to decide what should go where. And after a while, it just felt like the whole thing was a blur of like, just what is this? Don't know. And then I was like, Bobby, are we saying, is there anything new that we're saying here? Didn't we already say this? But Shambhala liked it. They thought they didn't give us much feedback at all about how changing things.
Well, that wasn't a criticism. I think it's like, you can present it in 1,000 different ways, and maybe
Yeah.
1,000 different people are going to hear it. Maybe, hopefully, if they're one of them.
Yeah, no, I wasn't trying to be defensive. I was seriously thinking when we give this to Shambhala, Bobby, they're just gonna, are they gonna say it? Just at some point we were so close to it, we couldn't really tell anymore, you know.
There's something, if you look at portions of the sutras or a chapter or a whole sutra, uh, invariably there's some engagement where somebody says something to Buddha, and Buddha essentially says uh, uh, that the Dharma is essentially formless and you should embody it, something like that, right? And then they'll ask another question, and he'll follow them along the questions they've raised, and go on for a long time about karma and consciousness and the paramitas and the dozens of this and whatever they happen to bring up, he'll fold it all in. And then at the end, he says, but you need to remember the Dharma is formless and you should embody it. So there's this kind of a spiraling out and then a spiraling back. And what I hear you both talking about is a recognition that it's the point from which you spiral out and spiral back that's the most important point to remember. But at the same time, because we encounter people with temperament and circumstances, it's important to be able to walk alongside somebody uh, as they raise issues, because it's the being close and how you are when you're close that says at least as much as what comes out of your mouth. And I think maybe if you could say a little bit about that, Elizabeth, because you got pretty close to Bobby. And so there's something that you didn't talk about, maybe, uh, and there's something that you didn't say to each other, maybe. But I'm guessing it's that something that you didn't talk about and wasn't said that left a strong impression on you. So if I'm anywhere close to the mark on that, maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Okay, sure. And then Eileen has a question too. So, but I'll answer your question first, Ken. It's really good to have an editor. It's really good to have someone who believes in what you're doing 100% and supports you putting yourself forward. And I'm her student and she's my teacher. And I have a lot of I have being able to see her and with her insecurities about writing, and me being able to support her, and her being able to be vulnerable to me, and we're friends too, you know, and to be able to develop a level of trust that we were very comfortable with each other. And that allowed for the collaboration, like that relationship that we had, the kind of relationship that we had allowed for the collaboration that's here. I don't know if that really answers your question.
Well, you learn something about her, you learn something about you, and you learn something about practice.
Yeah. And to be able to see someone who's the head teacher of our school struggle
Hmm.
and with something that I could help her with, it was so humbling for me at the same time that it was built my confidence.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you.
Eileen, what you got, friend?
Hey, thank you, Elizabeth, for being here. Well, what Ken was talking about is what I feel about this book, and actually what I look for in a lot of things now when I encounter the material. There is what the words say of what happened, and there is the intuited, shall we say, experience of the life that was lived behind it. And for me now, at my time of life, I think that part where what is the lived life, the struggle, the insecurities, in spite of your being A, B, or C, that teaches me a lot. Yeah? And I think that your book delivers for me a good sense of that. What was the lived life behind it? And in particular, in this chapter we're looking at now on page 70, there's where she talks about her retreats, and page 70 covers the third retreat. And the aspect of which that's the aspect that struck me in this particular passage was her dealing with the grief. Paragraph 2 says, about halfway through this retreat, I read a poem from the mystic poet Rumi, and this really hit me. This rain weeping and sun burning twine together to help us grow. Keep your intelligence white hot and your grief glistening, so your life will stay fresh. I climbed into my sleeping bag, and with a warm brick on my stomach, I cried. And then she goes on to talk more about it. I think as you grow older in particular, you become aware that you have many friends and friends of friends and family who are undergoing changes in the body and in the mind that are greatly, greatly painful. And there's nothing you can do about it. So this passage where she talks about how she deals with grief, you just fall apart and yet somehow you find your way back. I found this deeply moving. And I was wondering whether this came from a transcription of a talk she gave before, or was it something that she revealed to you in person? And when you were listening to this, receiving this, if it was in person, how it affected you?
This would have come from a Dharma talk that had been recorded. And I don't remember which Dharma talk that was right now. But what really struck me when you started asking your question, and I felt the whole way through, is about how this hit me and like why I chose this, why I chose this particular section for the book. There was a lot of material that I had to choose from. And what I didn't say about the book is that working on this book with Bobby was a buoy for me during a very difficult time of my life. I'm going through a divorce, and Bobby she was a huge source of support for me. She was like the person I went to with all the things and the decision, like through all the years of trying to decide if I was going to do it and how I was going to do it, and all the checking, making, and holding, and like all my process going through it. And the other thing to know is that Bobby is the same age as my mother, who died in 2014. So I didn't have my mother to talk with about my decision to get a divorce. And my mother herself had gone through a divorce. She raised my brother and I as a single mother. And Bobby went through a divorce. And another thing that we had in common was we both have daughters. And so my biggest worry, as I really decided that I was thinking seriously about getting divorced, was about my daughter and the effect that it would have on my daughter. And So figuring out how to trust, find my clear way through that was very difficult and involved a lot of grieving. And, you know, working on this book was a buoy for me during that time. It was something I could always go to. And by the way, it was also during COVID. So a lot of it was during COVID. I mean, not initially, but a lot of the writing, when I got really deep into the book, working on the book was during COVID. So I was very isolated in a situation where it felt like my family was in crisis and I didn't know what to do. And so being able to talk with Bobby, so she lives on the West Coast and I live on the East Coast. And so we were able to use Zoom like we're using now for the most part. And I would record our Zoom conversations, just, conversations we were having. And I must admit, some of the interview questions I asked her were personal questions that I needed help with.
It's kind of like the book was your warm brick.
Yeah.
Wish I could give you a hug, friend, but thank you for being so open. That's Keith, my friend, do you have a question for Elizabeth?
Uh, just if we that section we just read speaks a little bit about grief, and I was wondering if there were any other points where I know you had mentioned you wanted to do something on trauma and grief, and then you ended up uh, doing this book from Bobby's perspective. So, are there any other ways that she has described grief that we haven't got to yet, or things that are more on the subject of grief, processing? Yeah.
There were a lot of pretty personal things in here that didn't really make it. Some of the things I felt were delicate and didn't put them in. And some of the things were delicate and she decided not to put them in. Some of the things about her family members and her relationship with her own, like her relationship with her siblings and her parents, that, and Bobby, she clearly had used our practice, the methods of our practice, to help her work through a lot of that. I think maybe you didn't get to the part a little later on where she talks about how she used Jijang Bosal practice to work through the death of her father, for example. And that was after he died. They had a difficult relationship, and that she used the Jijang Bosal practice to help connect with him, and it really helped her, and it helped her work on her relationship with him even after he died.
Yeah, my relationship with grief is I want to kind of experience my way through it and not push it away in any sense. But sometimes it feels like there's a natural distance after passing, and so just recently I've been experiencing a kind of a image of my recently passed grandfather, and so he's like in my field of view, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do from here when I'm experiencing him in this distant way? And I just I guess that is a an opportunity to express what needs to be expressed, and
You could do whatever you want,
yeah,
right?
I guess yeah, that's what I'm leaving that open.
Yeah.
I'm doing it the way I intuit. Uh, it's like you know, I want peaceful rest for my ancestors and all those who have passed. And
What, why? What do you know that's, why do you think that's what they need?
I just I'm running off convention, I assume. At this point, uh,
Those ancestors need to be put to work. They got to help us. What
yeah,
happened up
well,
here? They got it
okay.
easy.
So I guess working with him is something I'm open to. But and it was kind of just a peaceful contentedness that was showing, coming forth, arising in the moment. And I want to make sure that he is at peace. And it wasn't that we were separate. We've talked about this in previous weeks. I had brought up the um, when Bobby talks about I I forget what chapter, but specifically it was the relationship with the true self. She can in the practice we can just connect with it. We can just return in the moment. Uh, and so I brought up the topic of distance as a like anything. It's like an illusion of separation. Uh, and so when that comes with an actual, beyond the grave kind of thing, I'm like, uh, I hope you're happy. Say what you need to say. Be as you are. Be as you should be. Don't keep me up. Don't keep me up at night. uh, yeah, and now I'm talking. I think I'm out of my time. I think.
Keep you up at night now.
Yeah. Um. So I have an interesting relationship with grief, and I just was curious if you had I know processing grief is challenging, and my whole view is just to endure it and give it the time that it needs until such a time that something else comes up, and then we return to the moment, or we allow the moment to be expressed into a new moment, and moment by moment, everything happens.
I find with my mother that there's some ways I got used to her not being there, that the grief got easier as I got used to it. But then there's other ways actually that over time I missed her more because it had been longer since I saw her. So it's really mixed. Um, it's a lot of things like, um, but it does get easier in a lot. You get used to that, whatever this feeling is that you're having, you get used to it a little more. And then you end up kind of cherishing it in a way because it connects you to him.
Yeah. In terms of practice, if you note that something persists and something transforms, and for anybody else to tell you what that is would be presumptuous, other than to tell you that happens. And I think if you let your mind see how that happens, then the distance and the intimacy that you need will kind of happen on its own. And you suggested that you're trusting whatever arises for you, and you're trusting your capacity to remain grounded in the middle of it, and you're trusting your capacity to be with it and to allow it to pass through you and to transform you. So there's a certain wisdom that you're suggesting is worth following.
Brandon, my friend, do you have a question for Elizabeth?
Well, it kind of got answered already, but as the questions have come, a lot of them have been answered. I've been coming up with a couple, and then it'll get answered as she's talking. But if I had to pick one, I guess I'll end with this. So, thank you for being here, by the way. Uh, and so, in the seventh chapter, it talks about the middle way, and she goes into the famous story of the Buddha with the guitar strings. But did you find it the process of working with her times where it it felt very organic, and then other times it felt kind of like you were straining at something, or was the whole process kind of an organic process? Or how did it kind of go rate it overall?
I like that you brought up that section because that section had a lot of meaning for me because I'm an overthinker and I'm really hard on myself. And none of that, I felt like I was doing a lot of things that didn't feel very middle way at all. And that maybe it was when I was working on that section that I thought, for crying out loud, Elizabeth, you just start practicing what you're writing about here. So, and I laughed like it was new. Like, so that one of the things that I love that I actually don't think I knew when I wrote that section that I only learned more recently when I read a biography of the Buddha, if such a thing is possible, was that the Buddha at first was engaged in a lot of ascetic practices. He was starving himself to death to try to purge himself of his desires. And he said, this is not working. I'm going to go eat some food and sit under this tree. And then he realized what he felt was a lot more useful was making friends with what was happening inside of him and trying, instead of trying to rid himself of it. That was just more attachment. And so from my understanding, that is where that concept of middle way in terms of being attached to the Buddha comes from. This idea that we need to be friendly with what's happening inside of us in order to learn how to work with what we have in a way that doesn't have a lot of attachments, good or bad. So I feel like that I did start more organic, like really working on that when I was writing this section for myself. I was trying to work more on that. I have had a lot of harsh, not middle way stuff about, once I realized, for example, that I wanted to get divorced, I was not at all happy with myself. And so I remember this section really helped, right? Working on this section.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions for you all, but, well, one question I have that I'll just kind of put out there, which you can answer now if you have thoughts, but keep in mind, and please let me know, is as you're reading, I'm very curious if there's anything that you wish you want to know more about. Because every once in a while, Bobby, she forgets how hard it was. And she says, oh, we should do another book. So, so anyway, I said, well, Bobby, this is a baby. We still have to nurture this baby along. But I am curious. And to me, that would be a natural way to do it, is to see, well, what are people interested in
Mm,
hearing more about? So that's one question. But then I have a specific question for you, Ken.
mm.
As editor of Primary Point, I'm curious if you recognize any of the excerpts from Primary Point.
Oh, my memory is god awful. We could have collaborated on it for 12 weeks and sent 23 emails back and forth, but it was a couple of years ago. If you ask Maggie, she'll tell you how terrible my memory is. So, sad to say, I don't, but that's my character defect or
Oh, I
my,
don't remember either. That's one of the reasons
oh,
I asked, is because every
you're
once in a
okay.
while I'll read something and I'll think, hey, damn, that's pretty good. And I mean, obviously, a lot of times I read it and think that,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes I wonder, well, geez, did I write that? Or was that from Primary Point? Like, who wrote that? Did Bobby write that? I have no idea. It was really, so we
I
all
wish I
have a
could
bad memory.
I wish I could help you other than uh the things that you sent to Primary Point. What I'm looking for is a good representation of the Dharma, a good teaching bone, and something that flows well so that it's reader friendly. And everything you sent was that. Eileen wants to rescue us.
Mm.
Um, kind of preempted the next question I was going to ask Elizabeth. If there is anything at all lacking in the book, is that you have obviously amassed a vast compendium of resources, a lot of which are available online, either in your own building or in somebody else's building. And I feel that the book would have benefited from a long appendix of online resources.
Mm.
Because one of the great things about Bobby, I think for me, is when I actually listen to her talk, it delivers to me that tonal warmth that is and straightforwardness that is so characteristic of her. And I think somebody who reads this would benefit from just having, of course, everybody knows that they can Google and go to YouTube now, they can. But you've actually done the work of putting a coherent library together, which is specifically of her. And that's what I would have. I would like your next book or your next edition to have. I'm not going to say I think you should attach a little digital chip that a reader can immediately plug into his phone or something like that. I'm not going to say that, but yeah.
Well, if I can piggyback on that, you have the whole collection of all those talks, and there may be some value in uh, figuring out a way to make those accessible, or some of those accessible in any case, so that there's that there is a place to go. That would certainly be easy enough for us to advertise in Primary Point and for us to make known to the Sangha and to have links on our web pages.
And then to piggyback on that, since you asked, do we have any questions? If you had, I'm not saying you moderate a website, but such a thing might allow people to ask questions. And I'm thinking of Dvzc Nim's teaching letters, which are so invaluable for giving us a sense of who he was, directly answering a student's questions. So,
You mean like to have that, but for Bobby's things? Bobby's questions?
well, if you read anything by anybody, it's inevitable that a question will appear at some time or the other. And sometimes the questions are just something that you've responded to, and you think a particular teacher, in the case of Dvzc's name, it was his students, right? So it becomes a conversation between a student and a teacher, which in his case took the form later of the teaching letters.
Mhm.
So there's lots of ways for you to go forward on this in response to Bobby's, we need a second book.
Well, yes, if you hear second book more broadly as it would be valuable to make other teachings of hers available, then it has multiple potentials.
I agree with that. I think that would be really neat if a book could be put together of her teachings. That would be pretty cool.
Thank you.
And I'm going to take your question away as I finish the book because I haven't finished it yet. And then I'll follow back up with you, my friend.
Okay, thank you.
If your door is open, you may be receiving a number of responses to that. It's a good question.
Here, I'll just give you my email address directly.
There's also the aspect, what question does Bobby wish somebody would ask her that they haven't already asked?
I like that. You can ask her that at the next Dharma talk she gives.
Friends, we'll put it almost out of time. If you guys don't have anything else, we won't hold you, Elizabeth. But this has been a really awesome. I really do wish I could hug you, my friend. You're so awesome. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Sharon, when is our next event?
So let me look at the calendar. Brandon, let's see. We said the 8th, right, Keith? Because, or am I getting it mixed up? Is it the 1st or the 8th?
Should be the first,
Okay.
unless we do want another break to the 15th, maybe. It depends what we decide now. I'm open for the first.
Okay.
What is the consensus here?
I think Brandon met with Ken already. So Brandon, are you comfortable with the 1st?
Yeah, I'm fine with the first.
Okay.
Right, and Brandon was going to be sending out some prompts, which he'll send to me, and then I'll send back to him, and then we'll all send to you, probably through Sharon.
Awesome. I look
Okay,
forward.
guys.
That's next week, right?
Yes.
So you all meet every week?
So yeah, every other week. He wanted to do
every
it
other.
in rotation with Rhode Island.
Yeah, we're doing it.
Question.
Go ahead, Aileen.
I have a question about this recording. I think when I first requested that you ask Elizabeth for permission, it's because it was clear several people weren't going to be present. So I'd like to know, are you going to make this available to everyone on the mailing list? And will there be instructions there to please not forward it?
Well, I have a YouTube channel to host it. And it's that I don't know. The only other way would be to send it a file, but my plan was to put it on my YouTube channel and then put a link in one of the emails. So I don't whether or not we forward it or not, that's open to your interpretation.
I think basically I'm asking about Elizabeth because she, really this material and what she has shared with about her own life here is about her. So whether she's comfortable with everybody having access to to it.
I appreciate your sensitivity and thinking of that, Eileen. Um, I just assume that if I'm giving a talk like this, that it's not confidential unless maybe I say something is confidential, please edit it out. But no, I've made my peace with that. I feel like Bobby's a good role model for that. She uses herself, and so my experience is a very human experience. If somebody can get something from it, great.
And our
Thank you.
door's always open. Any Tuesday you want to come, you come join the meeting, my friend.
Oh,
Come hang out with us.
thank you.
Yeah, are you on our, well, can we get Elizabeth on our mailing list if you're not already, and then you can just see what the flow is and do whatever you choose.
You can add.
Yeah,
Right,
we
Tom?
can, yeah, we can do that. So specifically for the book club mailing list or our big mailing list? We have multiple mailing lists.
Oh, well,
Book
those
club.
decisions are above my pay grade.
Okay.
There's this.
We'll start with the book club.
Awesome. Then I'll send you the prompts if you want to see them.
Yeah.
For Brandon's next, because Brandon, you have what, chapter 7?
I think 7 and 8.
7 and 8.
Mhm.
I'm curious to see now that we've talked about 7, what you have there.
You will find out.
I know, I'm excited. All right, gang.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next
Have a good
time.
night.